Thursday at 8 o'clock, we always enjoy checking in with the one, the only Sam Amick. No matter how we do it, and today it's going to be via the telephone. We'll miss seeing his pretty face there on the big screen, but Sam joining us here on the Folsom Lake Honda hotline. Good morning, Sam. How are you?
Good morning, Jay. I'm doing great. Sorry for the adjustment. It's one of those quasi-hectic family mornings, so we'll make it work.
Everything good, though? You guys out and about and on the move and just hectic stuff going on this morning?
Oh, yeah. We're taking little man to school. Usually he has other means of transportation. Those are not available today, so hence the adjustment. But, yes, all is good.
Okay.
How are you, brother?
I'm doing well. I mean, I'm trying to, sort out these Kings. I think this season, I had someone ask me, like, what do you think is going to go on the rest of the way? I said, probably more of the same. I mean, some good, some bad, some head scratchers, some impressive wins. I mean, they really have the whole grab bag of a season. The season has been good. It hasn't been great. And they're kind of in that stretch where, I mean, I love Sunday's win against the Clippers. Was kind of disappointed with the Heat loss last night. Was a little bit predictable, but I don't know. What's your opinion overall and just, kind of the roller coaster that has been the Sacramento Kings?
No, I mean, you captured it well. They're just incredibly inconsistent. The Miami game. I mean, on the one hand, predictable because they've done that before, but you're looking at it going, okay, you've done it quite a few times at this point. So, the mentality should be different. You just find a way to beat a team that's down so many guys, and they still couldn't do it. Then I'm watching the Denver game, and admittedly, when they're up 11-12, you're kind of, especially with Fox out, you're thinking, okay, there's no way they're going to hold on to this lead. But the speed with which they gave it up was impressive. So they are, they're like you said, they're a good team. They're not scaring anybody. And in terms of what they want to accomplish, which is to not only get in the playoffs, but get out of the first round, we can only assess the right here and right now, but it's they don't look very strong. They don't look very, very deep, very consistent. And honestly, they show flashes of like extreme competitiveness, like the defense in that Clippers game. Mm-hmm. And the Miami game when they almost came back from 20 down or whatever it was. But the flashes are just not enough to make you go, okay, this team's in a good place.
Yeah, that to me is where, I mean, look, I've done this long enough, you've done it long enough, but when I saw the last win before the All-Star break, which I was really impressed by against the Nuggets, the streak, the mini win streak out of the All-Star break and the win against the Clippers, like after that one I went, all right, this is the first time I felt like maybe there is more here. Maybe they can win a playoff series because we'd seen enough of the other times where you go, I just don't know if there is enough there, to your point. And now I'm kind of in the spot, Sam, where I think they'll be in the top 10. I think they're pretty safe there. But I feel like it's got to be the right matchup for them to get through. And I honestly don't know what the right matchup is for them.
Well, what's funny about that, and I do agree, is that some of these teams that they've had surprising success against have now gone on to be even more intimidating or daunting. Mm-hmm. Like OKC comes to mind. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. If I remember correctly, they've showed out pretty well against the Thunder. Well, Now it's like, I don't know, man, the Thunder have really found themselves and they're literally competing for the top spot in the West. Minnesota's a tough matchup, but the matchup's going to matter. The disclaimer that is, I'm not going out on a limb, but I did think about this the other day. This season is so funny and this particular mix of teams is so unique as far as the parity that, like, who the hell knows? They get in the first round, the mood could be bad around the team, and they shock the world and they win a series. But it does feel like something's missing. Fox obviously has been dealing with the shoulder and dealing with stuff, the knee now, and he's fallen off a little bit. But I kind of just go back to that idea that they wanted to be a team that did kind of scare people, and they're not, and that's just, I think, a reality.
Yeah, and they're going to have to look back on that, on the decisions they made, not just, trade deadline, but the summer, and electing to bring it back made some sense too. And, they did have a good year last year, and some things are paralleling that. I think what maybe they didn't see coming was this truly is a year where the West is that daunting. I think there's been a couple times it's been framed that way, and I kind of pushed back the last couple of years, Sam, where I didn't think it was, at least at the bottom. I mean, I think there was a year the Kings were, when they didn't make it, but they were fighting for the 10 seed or trying to get in the play-in. Maybe the Spurs got there at like 33 wins. Well, that's very reachable. The Kings are already there now, and they're in eighth. And the Lakers
Right.
and Warriors are above 500, and there's still people that think, hey, if everything goes right, maybe they could get out of the West. So that top 10 is far more competitive this year than I think it's been in the last 2 to 3 years.
100%. I mean, that you don't want to. You're not. I'm not going to take anything away from what they did last year, but they didn't. You talk about scaring teams. They didn't scare teams last season as much as a third seed typically would,
right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that was the unique part of last year. And now I think about the Warriors, actually. I've been debating with people recently because the Warriors at this point have won, I think, 12 out of 15, 12 out of 16, something like that. And so you ask yourself, all right, can they get from 10 to 6? Because, Steve Kerr has identified the 6th spot as a target. And at face value, I think when I looked at it last, it was 3.5 games for them to get up to 6. And that feels pretty doable. Well, the problem, and again, this is what is so hard for the Kings, is it's like, oh, by the way, the teams in the middle there are the Suns and the Pelicans and the Mavericks. Like, these are teams. Think about those 3 teams. Suns, if they had Bradley Beal, were literally like the latest so-called super team in terms of star power. The Pelicans, flawed though they might be, you got Zion, you got Brandon Ingram, you got CJ McCollum, all this, high-level talent. The Mavs, of course, with Luka and Kyrie. So you're not talking about your kind of run-of-the-mill, middle-of-the-pack teams. These are pretty dynamic teams when they're at their best.
Yeah, and I think the teams, you're right, that catch the most of my attention as far as intrigue about the rest of this year and going forward. I would put the Warriors, the Lakers, you mentioned the Suns, and maybe the Clippers, because I feel like they're all the closest to it's got to be a championship or what. And I don't know what the what means, if that's a breakup or something different. Maybe it's not as drastic as that, but they're all kind of invested in that way. Do you agree with that on the Clippers, Suns, Lakers, Warriors, and none of them may get it, but they're all kind of in that championship or bust mode?
I would probably Clippers more than anybody, because of the structure of their contracts. They re-signed or extended Kawhi Leonard, obviously, and Paul George probably gets done. James Harden going to be a free agent. Steve Ballmer has been very antsy with these years of load management and now has his new arena coming. So the pressure there is, I think, greater than the others. The Lakers, it's funny. I mean, if nobody with the Lakers or LeBron himself would say this out loud, but it just feels like they just want to compete at a high level, entertain fans. The Lakers always need to have a star, make sure LeBron finishes his career in a Laker jersey. I see that one a little bit differently in terms of title contention.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Jay, you can probably relate here. I'm enjoying getting tailed by a fellow parent as I come into school.
Keep it moving.
Do you mind if I get in a fight here on live radio?
Actually, I really encourage it.
It's hilarious. I should air them out.
Are you good? Are you
on live radio? Yeah. I'm good. So who else do we got? Warriors in there. I mean, Warriors, they're kind of like the Lakers. They want to talk about titles. They just need to be a really good team.
Okay.
I feel like I'm leaving one of them out, but
we said Phoenix. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Clippers to me is the only one there that really is pushing for it. Even Suns, Kevin Durant obviously isn't getting younger. But they've just had so many injuries this year. They do have an excuse. We'll see if they can pull it together at the end. But again, I just go back to that word of fear and scaring teams. Those teams have a greater capacity to, I think, intimidate the opponent right now than the Kings do.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I totally agree with that. So as you look at, I think the 10, I feel safe that the 10 are set. Now, what order, that's changing every night. But as you look at that, I mean, the 2 at the top are kind of nice, surprising stories in Minnesota and OKC and have the least amount of playoff experience. The champs are right there at 3rd. The Clippers have been as good as anybody for the bulk of the year once they kind of figured it out. Do you have someone you're leaning to, if you were to handicap this and said, I'm going to pick this team to get out of the West? I think that's a tough call, but where would you lean?
I probably got to lean, and I've been really slow on this, OKC, because I can't wrap my head around the fact. You're saying get out of the West?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I Minnesota's offense Jekyll and Hyde quality, I guess, is something that is, eventually probably going to trip them up, even though a very strong defense. I don't necessarily trust like a Karl Anthony Towns to be that guy in moments in the playoffs when Ant is getting doubled and they're trying to find another place to get offense. But OKC is just incredibly balanced. Last night watching their game, looking at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's numbers, which I knew how good they were, but there's a couple things come to mind. First of all, they compared him to Michael Jordan's first MVP year, and they basically were the same, which is just, that'll get your attention. But man, the defensive side of the ball, when it comes to Shai in particular, who, as an aside, I'm having to figure out, like, man, where is he at on my MVP list? The guy is getting steals and getting deflections. He is a two-way player in every sense of the word, and they just don't seem, kind of spooked by the moment at all. They, Mark Dagnall quietly has done a great job coaching the last couple of years. So I don't know. I like what they do. I like how they function, and they just seem to be wired in a certain way where they're not really shook by some of the acclaim that's coming their way. So, top of mind, that would be the one that I guess I could see a little bit.
And you think about where they are, whether that comes their way or not, compared to the teams we just referenced, like the Warriors, the Lakers, the Clippers, and the Suns. They are so young and so loaded with future assets. Like, they are in such a terrific place right now.
Oh, it's crazy. I had that same thought watching that same game, and I don't know why I'm blanking on who they played last night. But yeah, it's like, man, what do you do when you could go out and trade for a star, but like, I don't know, you're like, if you're at the top of the West, what are you trying to accomplish? You know what I mean? You probably need to see this group through. So let's say, they're pretty happy with how everything's finished in the playoffs, and now you've got this cupboard full of assets. It's a good place to be in. It's a good problem to have, but it's tricky nonetheless, because, a lot of times, one trade looks a certain way on paper, and you think it's going to make you better, and you might actually take a step back because you mess with the chemistry or whatever, might have happened in that deal. But I can't remember ever seeing a team that was this good, that was that well positioned to go out and do whatever they wanted on the trade market.
Yeah, as we're talking with Sam Amick from The Athletic, and might be in a fight near you. Everything good on the drop-off there?
We're good, buddy. We're
okay,
good.
Okay,
We're good. Thank you.
You brought up the MVP race. I think this is good. It's compelling. I think Jokic might be the lead, but that I could be wrong on that. Tatum, SGA you mentioned. This is also a good race, I think, and maybe it shouldn't be decided yet. Maybe the last 22 to 25 games will be the dictator. Do you have a leader in that at this point?
So, I've had Jokic, probably still have Jokic. I think from there, the question becomes a couple things. If the Thunder are the number one seed, then I think I'm going to have to look hard at that and decide, in terms of impact and truly, that's going to be for sure one of those where you try to get a few coaches' opinions and, get outside the numbers a little bit to just basically ask people if they think you're nuts for possibly thinking about giving it to him. But, I think he's more on that short list than he was before. Luka still comes to mind, depending on, the Mavs are too far down, I think, for Luka to get it, but he's having just an incredible year. And he's so much fun to watch. And obviously when Kyrie's out there, they're actually functioning pretty well. Giannis is another one that I would say don't sleep on, because the Bucks have gotten a little better the last couple of games, small sample size. And obviously got off to a tough start with Doc Rivers. But if they can make headway in the East and get closer to Boston, his numbers and his impact are pretty historic, pretty, impactful. The Tatum one is, that's a discussion in and of itself, where there is part of me that, we talked before, Jay, about how this MVP calculus is so imperfect, but there, a lot of former players especially tend to kind of fall back on the best player, best team formula. Now, it's not that simple, but my God, Jason Tatum is pretty damn good, and he probably doesn't get as much shine as he should. And, it's because I think for one, he's just not the playmaker that so many of those other guys are. He is a two-way player, he also has a deeper roster where you look at it and you say, okay, the gap between him and Jaylen Brown is smaller than it is for a Jokic to a Jamal Murray or even a Giannis to a Dame or whoever else you might want to look at. But I think Tatum's got so it's a pretty interesting race right now for sure.
Yeah, that's where I fall on Tatum. There's no doubt he's gifted. I mean, he's one of the game's greats. I feel like every time I watch Boston, I think so highly of Tatum, but I land on the same spot. I go, man, Jaylen Brown might be their best player. You know what? Derek White, where would they be without him? Porzingis is unbelievable. Oh, Holiday, what a glue. Like, it just feels like certain nights Tatum's important in all of that, but some nights it feels like there's someone else that is equally important or better on a certain night where it shouldn't really be a punishment to Tatum, but I feel like I go there with him sometimes, and maybe that's wrong in my thinking.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's a little bit like, different caliber or at least different resume, but Anthony Edwards, so far anyway, I think has got a similar problem in Minnesota, where they're deep in the way that they're beating teams is sophisticated enough, if that makes sense, that the credit, if you had a pie graph divvying up the credit, there's just going to be more names on there than there would be for a lot of teams. Yeah. So, but you try not to forget, especially that, like, even in this like offensively crazed era, the defense does matter. And so that should, you lose brownie points if you're Luka. Now Jokic is an interesting one. You lose less brownie points than he used to. Like he's become a plus defender and a guy that is typically part of really good defensive units. And you hear other bigs talk about, Jokic and the way he's improved defensively, but he's no Joel Embiid, he's no Giannis. So you lose a few brownie points there. So both ends of the floor should be taken into account. In that regard, Edwards gets, some love on that end. He's a very good, especially on-ball defender. But with Tatum, there's just something about it. He's just like a high-level kind of 1B player, I think is how he's kind of widely perceived.
Yeah, it would be interesting. It's not the case, obviously, but maybe in the first 20 games of the year, the way De'Aaron was playing, we're talking about him at maybe the back end of the early MVP conversation. Then there's been a stretch here where Sabonis has gone nuts, and hey, he's not the MVP, but he's played like one. Where if the Kings were, for example, having the OKC or the Minnesota year, I don't know, how you would parse the difference between Fox and Sabonis. But I mean, it's not the situation, but that could be kind of a similar argument, I guess.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I was admittedly kind of surprised yesterday seeing Kendrick Perkins caping for Sabonis to get some MVP love. I mean, you're not going to get it when you're fighting for the position they're in.
Right.
But I would agree with him and have been kind of vocal about this, that Sabonis has not gotten the credit he's deserved for his year. I mean, he's been remarkable, and some of this stuff, we don't need to overthink it. When you start seeing numbers that, where guys like Jokic are the only ones who have done things like Sabonis is doing this year, in terms of triple doubles, in terms of, efficiency from the field, he's been remarkable. But yeah, you're right. Like the way they function is they're going to fight like the All-Star fight every year, where it's going to be most likely both guys don't get in from the Kings. So which one do you pick is always going to be a tough question.
Yeah. Talking with Sam Amick here from The Athletic. You can always read Sam's amazing work there and all the stuff he's working on. I'm sure this is going to be an area that's going to be featured a little bit more. You brought it up earlier about the offensively crazed era we're in. That could be fun. That could be good. But it seems like it's catching a little bit more attention from the league, and the front office is there. What would that look like? What's kind of their course correct you think they want to see in the near future, if you're getting any hints of that?
I mean, I don't have a great sense just yet. What comes to mind first is, do they do something different with defensive 3 seconds? I could certainly see that being a focal point. It's funny because I do think about JJ Redick had a rant recently talking about how if you looked at the league's rule changes recently, the irony is that quite a few of them have been done to help the defender, whether it's getting rid of the Kevin Durant rip through or the Trae Young kind of stutter stop in the lane where you hit the brakes and the guy runs into you. These little tricks that offensive players were doing to game the system. They've tried to litigate some of those out. So it is funny. Like I mean, it's probably not enough, but they've tried to do little things that at least made the game not appear gimmicky. But they might need to do more. So does hand checking become part of the conversation again, like the old days? You know, I don't know what it looks like, but you know, I think that the league office, man, I would pay a lot of money. Well, that wouldn't be very ethical. I would love, I would love to be a fly on the wall in the league office these days, because in the wake of All-Star Weekend, where it was pretty obvious that Adam Silver was not happy with the way the players handled, you know, that game, and that obviously symbolized the whole scoring problem. You know, it seems like this is a tipping point where I think Adam and Joe Dumars, who is now kind of his right-hand man, and that crew, you know, with Mark Tatum and Byron Spruill and the entire NBA brain trust, that they are trying to find ways to put this genie back in the bottle, and we'll see if they can.
Sam, what about you? What's catching your attention? What are some of the things you're going to be working on here that we can read soon?
Well, I just came out of the Warriors world. I enjoyed writing about Klay Thompson the other day and kind of his adjustment to the six-man life. I really enjoy. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like we're in this space where there's a lot of older players that, in terms of coverage, like I'm enjoying trying to tell a few of their stories as far as like Father Time, kind of knocking on that door, and how these guys handle it from a spirit standpoint, if that makes sense. So getting a chance to connect with Klay and find out how the hell he's doing. You know, we sometimes, I think, are guilty of just saying, oh, this guy makes $43 million a year. Who cares? He's fine. You know, it's like sports is sports. And if you don't play like you expect to, then, you know, your mentals are not going to be great. So I enjoyed writing that, because it was a little bit about how Klay, you know, has had to make this adjustment, and guys on the team say that he's managing okay, and they actually didn't think he would. So, you know, I find that not only interesting for Klay, but in the context of the Warriors, it's like, I compared it to somebody like a game of Jenga. Like you know, Klay is one of those pieces. If he can't handle the six-man role, then that whole thing is going to come crashing down, because there's this ripple effect from there, you know, with other guys needing to sacrifice as well. And if they see him being selfish or worrying too much about his own stuff, then, you know, it's not going to work. So the Warriors stuff is interesting. I know we got, what's that game Monday? We got Chicago coming into town against the Kings. So I'll be out at that one. We have we're chipping away at our annual anonymous player poll that should come out around playoff time. So look out for that. But just a little bit of everything right now.
Yeah, I always like that, because there's always, I know when sometimes either it just comes out or before it comes out, I've talked to you about that, and there's always something that surprises you. That's always kind of fun. I don't know if you've started that, I've gotten any of those surprises that you'd be comfortable leaking, but I think that's always fun to kind of really get the voice of the players and what they're thinking on some of the things you ask them.
Yeah, nothing quite yet. I agree. I like doing it, and I think the fans and the readers like it a lot, and a lot of players like it. You see their eyes kind of light up when you tell them that it's anonymous, like they can actually speak their mind.
Yeah.
And then I'd be lying if I didn't admit, like, it's fun to do, because you obviously never share who said what,
right?
But you learn little things about guys along the way, like, and you don't ever forget. You know what I mean? Like, just little things that might give you insight into, you know, how they see the game or how they see certain teams or certain people. It's just a level of candor that a lot of times is tougher for us to get to. So, we're just getting started. It's a staff-wide thing. It's heavy lifting, man. Like, we're trying to get, I think we had 108 players last year, you know, trying to have at least a couple guys from each team. So hopefully that comes together pretty well.
Yeah. And I mean, does anybody kind of pass on that? I mean, you pretty much get, if you ask, do you get people to participate?
No, it can be, there's some teeth pulling sometimes.
Okay.
I mean, it's a combination of you try to, access is tougher than it used to be these days. So part of it is, can you just organically catch a guy in a locker room or at a practice, and say, hey, would you mind doing this? That works sometimes. You know, admittedly, sometimes it's easier if PR staff are willing to assist and kind of grease the wheels and tell their guys what the project is. So it's a combo of those two things. You will definitely get guys like within the conversation or the interview who don't want to answer individual questions. And that's the challenging part, because some of the most interesting answers are stuff that like guys typically like, one to highlight it is like, who's the most overrated player in the league?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes guys are like, oh, I don't want to talk, about somebody. And it's like, admittedly, we're not necessarily trying to get you to do that, but like the media does hype certain people, and we're curious what players think of, like, how does that juxtapose with what players actually think about their colleagues? So it's like when you get enough guys to give you an honest answer on a question like that, that is some of the most revealing, interesting stuff, but also some of the tougher stuff to get to.
Well, I look forward to that. I always enjoyed that every year. I know you enjoy the work. It's a lot of work for you on that one, but we look forward to that when that comes out. Also, everything you do there at The Athletic, Sam, we truly appreciate, and your time each and every week. And we're glad you stayed out of any kind of altercations this morning.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Sam. Talk to you next week.
Bye.
All right. That's the great Sam Amick joining us here from The Athletic. Again, we always appreciate Sam. I know it's one of our more popular segments each and every week, so thank you so much to the great Sam Amick. All right, more on the Kings and their loss. We'll recap the 3 in the key for that game from the Kings.